I met Emily during the final year of college. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, adventurous, and endlessly optimistic. I, on the other hand, was analytical, introverted, and preferred the comfort of routine. Our differences somehow worked together, creating a balance that felt unshakable. We got married 5 years after college, and over the last 9 years, we built a life that I thought was solid. I run a small but successful IT consulting firm, which keeps me busy but provides well for us. Emily, with her effervescent personality, works as a marketing executive and thrives on being surrounded by people. Despite our different temperaments, we shared common goals: financial stability, travel, and eventually starting a family. Emily was the social one in our marriage, always pulling me out of my comfort zone to try new things. She was the type to dive headfirst into a hobby or fitness trend. A year ago, she joined a high-end gym and raved about its boutique classes and state-of-the-art equipment. At the time, I thought it was a great outlet for her energy. On the surface, everything seemed fine. But if I'm being honest, there were subtle cracks forming over the years. Emily's charisma often left me feeling overshadowed. I wondered if she ever grew tired of my steady, predictable nature. Did she long for someone who matched her energy and drive? Still, I convinced myself we were just in a rut. Every couple goes through periods like this, I reasoned. I never imagined that her energy, her hunger for novelty, could lead her to something or someone that would threaten everything we'd built. Our routine had always been our anchor. Weekday mornings started with a shared coffee before we each went to work. Evenings were quiet, dinners at home, the occasional movie night, or catching up on our respective work. Weekends, however, were a stark contrast. Emily would often be out with friends or at the gym, while I preferred to tinker in my home office or catch up on reading. I noticed subtle changes in her a few months ago. She seemed more radiant, more alive, like a light inside her had been reignited. She began talking about her workouts more enthusiastically than usual, her newfound passion for strength training, the camaraderie of group fitness classes, and, of course, the trainer who had apparently revolutionized her approach to fitness. "Ryan really knows his stuff," she'd say over dinner. "He pushes me, but it's always encouraging. He's got this way of making everyone feel like they can do more." At first, I didn't think much of it. Emily had always been excitable, and her praise for Ryan felt no different from her raving about her favorite yoga instructor or the boutique bakery she discovered downtown. But as weeks passed, I began to notice that her gym sessions were stretching longer. What used to be an hour-long workout was now 2, sometimes 3 hours. She'd come home with a flushed glow, claiming the gym sauna or stretching sessions were the reason for her extended stay. I tried to be supportive. I even joked about joining her gym. "Maybe I'll finally figure out how to get these noodle arms in shape," I'd said one evening, flexing for her. She laughed but didn't encourage the idea. "You'd hate it," she said. "It's really intense, and I know you prefer low-key stuff like cycling or jogging." Her words stung, though I didn't say so. It wasn't what she said, but how she said it, a dismissiveness I hadn't heard before. As her gym hours increased, our time together dwindled. I found myself eating dinner alone more often than not. When we were together, her attention seemed elsewhere, more engaged with her phone or her thoughts than with me. I chalked it up to work stress or maybe a phase, though a growing unease began to gnaw at me. I wasn't sure when it started, but a gap was forming between us, and I had no idea how wide it would become. It was a Friday evening when the first undeniable crack appeared. Emily came home later than usual, her gym bag slung over her shoulder and her hair still damp from a shower. She was in high spirits, her cheeks flushed, but it wasn't the glow I was used to. There was something else, an excitement I couldn't place. "You're late," I said casually, looking up from my laptop. "Sorry," she replied, kicking off her sneakers. "Ryan organized this killer circuit today, and we all stayed late for a stretch session. I lost track of time." "Ryan again." I smiled, pushing my unease aside. "Sounds like he's putting you all through boot camp. Must be why you're looking so fit lately." She laughed, but it felt rehearsed, almost distant. That weekend, I decided to take a rare Saturday off work. I suggested we go out for brunch, something we hadn't done in months. Emily hesitated, checking her phone. "Actually," she said, I've already got plans to hit the gym. Ryan's running a special endurance workshop, and I really don't want to miss it. I felt my smile falter but nodded. Sure, maybe another time. The hours crawled by that Saturday. I tried to keep busy, tinkering with a side project, but my mind kept wandering. When Emily returned, she looked radiant, almost euphoric. She dropped her gym bag near the door and plopped onto the couch beside me. Workshop was great, she said, stretching her arms above her head. Ryan says I've got serious potential if I keep up this pace. That's great, I replied, though my voice felt hollow. As she talked, I noticed something strange. She'd started wearing makeup to the gym, a light touch of mascara, a hint of blush. Her workout gear seemed newer, trendier. I told myself it was silly to read into it, but I couldn't stop wondering why she suddenly cared so much about how she looked for a place that used to leave her drenched in sweat and indifferent to appearances. I don't know when exactly it started, but looking back, the signs were all there. It was a Thursday evening when Emily's behavior shifted from distant to outright evasive. She was rushing to leave for the gym, brushing past me in the hallway, muttering something about being late for her personal training session with Ryan. I stepped aside to let her pass and caught a glimpse of her phone screen. A message from R flashed briefly before she locked it. "Don't wait up for me tonight," she called over her shoulder. I froze for a moment. Why? Something going on after the gym? She hesitated, her hand hovering on the doorknob. No, just planning to shower and maybe sit in the sauna for a bit. I'll be back late. Something in her tone didn't sit right with me, but I pushed it down. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband questioning his wife's every move. Later that night, she came home well past 10, her hair damp, her cheeks flushed. I was still awake, lying on the couch, a book in my lap. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Long session?" "Yeah," she replied quickly. "It was intense. I'm exhausted." She dropped her bag by the door and made a beeline for the bathroom without another word. I stared at her bag for a long moment. A small part of me wanted to open it, search for something, anything, that would explain the gnawing feeling in my gut. But I didn't. The following week, things escalated. She became more guarded with her phone, always keeping it face down or tucked away. Her excuses for late gym sessions grew more creative. A last-minute group run, a special yoga class Ryan had suggested, or a team-building coffee outing with other gym members. Then there was the night she didn't come home until nearly midnight. When she walked through the door, her face was lit with a giddy energy I hadn't seen in years. "Lost track of time again?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She laughed nervously. "Yeah, sorry about that. Ryan and a few of us stayed after class to chat. We got carried away." That name again. Her smile faltered when she saw my expression. "You're not mad, are you?" "Mad? No," I said, though the tightness in my chest told another story. "But it'd be nice to spend some evenings together. Feels like you're always at the gym these days." Her face softened, and for a brief moment, I thought she might apologize. But instead, she placed a hand on my shoulder, gave it a light squeeze, and said, "You're sweet. I'll make it up to you." She never did. The intimacy between us grew sparse, replaced by a tension I couldn't quite articulate. And while I had no proof, no concrete evidence, I felt it in my gut. Emily was drifting further and further away, her late nights and glowing smiles meant for someone else. The weeks passed, and Emily's absences became part of the new normal. I tried to keep myself busy, pouring more time into work and hobbies, but the growing void in our relationship was impossible to ignore. She would come home late, always with a rehearsed excuse, an extra-long workout, a spontaneous smoothie stop with friends, or some new stretching class that everyone was raving about. I stopped asking questions. Every time I did, it seemed to drive a wedge deeper between us. One evening, after another lonely dinner at the kitchen table, I decided to break the silence. "Emily," I said as she walked in, gym bag in tow, "can we talk for a second?" She paused, her hand gripping the strap of her bag. "What's up?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, please." She hesitated before obliging, her expression guarded. "You've been spending so much time at the gym lately," I began. "And I get it. You're passionate about it, and it's great for you. But I hesitated, struggling to put my feelings into words. It feels like we're drifting apart, like we don't have time for each other anymore. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I don't think that's fair, she said after a moment. You've been busy with work too. It's not like I'm the only one who's distracted. I'm not blaming you, I said quickly. I miss us, the way we used to be. Her expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I'd gotten through to her. I miss us too, she said quietly, but then her gaze dropped to the table. It's just, the gym has been a good outlet for me, you know? A way to blow off steam. I didn't realize it was bothering you so much. It's not the gym, I said. It feels like you're somewhere else, even when you're here. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, a flash of something unreadable passing through them. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Maybe we've both been a little off lately. I'll try to do better. Her words sounded hollow, but I clung to them anyway. For the next week, things seemed to improve, marginally. Emily stayed home a couple of nights, and we even shared a meal without distractions. But the spark between us felt dim, like a fire struggling to stay lit in the wind. And then she went back to her usual routine. Late nights, guarded phone calls, and an enthusiasm for the gym that felt increasingly suspect. I wanted to believe her when she said things would get better. But deep down, I knew the distance between us wasn't something we could bridge so easily. I tried to ignore the nagging voice in my head, the one that whispered doubts and pointed out inconsistencies. But it was getting harder. The gym was always her excuse, her sanctuary, her escape. Yet, something didn't add up. The workouts that used to be an hour or two were now taking up entire evenings. Her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter or coffee table, was now glued to her side. Even when she wasn't using it, it was face down, locked, and always within reach. One night, curiosity got the better of me. While Emily was in the shower, I picked up her phone. My heart raced as I swiped to unlock it, but her passcode had changed. That shouldn't have been a big deal. People change their passcodes all the time. But why hadn't she told me? I put the phone back where I found it, my chest tight with unease. The next day, I brought it up casually over breakfast. Hey, I noticed your phone passcode is different, I said, keeping my tone light. Did something happen? Emily barely looked up from her coffee. Oh yeah, she said. I had to change it after that data breach thing at work. IT recommended everyone update their passwords. It was a reasonable explanation, but her delivery felt off, like she'd rehearsed it. That makes sense, I said, forcing a smile. Can you share the new code with me, just in case? She hesitated for the briefest moment before replying, of course. It's 4567. I nodded, though something about her tone made me uneasy. Later that day, I tried unlocking her phone with the code she'd given me. It didn't work. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She'd lied. By the time she came home that evening, I was still reeling. She kissed me on the cheek as she walked through the door, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. How was your day? She asked, setting her gym bag down. Fine, I replied, my voice strained. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to demand the truth. But I held back. I needed more than suspicion if I was going to get to the bottom of this. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. A heavy, suffocating dread settled over me. Whatever was going on, it wasn't innocent. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living with a stranger. Emily's behaviors, once endearing, now felt suspicious. Her quick smile seemed forced, her casual touches calculated. One evening, my friend Jay came over. He was my closest confidant, someone I trusted implicitly. Over beers in the living room, I unloaded my worries. I don't know, man, I said, staring at the condensation on my bottle. It's like she's a completely different person. She's always at the gym and her phone. She's hiding something, Jake. Jake listened quietly, his expression growing more serious with every word. Finally, he set his drink down and leaned forward. You sure you're not just overthinking it? He asked, though his tone lacked conviction. I wish I were, I said. But it's not just a feeling anymore. She lied to me about her phone passcode. And the way she talks about this trainer, Ryan, I trailed off, my stomach twisting. Jake was quiet for a moment before nodding. All right, let's say something is going on. What's your plan? I don't have one, I admitted. I don't even know where to start. I just need to know the truth. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, hesitating before speaking again. Look, I'm not saying this to make things worse, but you remember my buddy Chris? He goes to that gym too. He mentioned seeing Emily there a lot, but he also said something about her spending extra time with a trainer. It sounded innocent when he told me, but now, the implication hung in the air between us. My chest tightened. I think I need to start digging, I said quietly. Jake nodded. Whatever you need, man. I've got your back. That night, I found myself scrolling through Emily's social media, looking for clues. Her posts were sparse, mostly fitness-related. But one caught my attention. A photo of her at the gym, smiling broadly, with Ryan tagged in the comments. I clicked his profile. His page was filled with pictures of him flexing, leading classes, and smiling with clients. There was nothing overtly incriminating, but seeing his face, this smug, chiseled man who seemed to embody everything I wasn't, made my blood boil. I closed my laptop, unable to look at it any longer. If Emily was hiding something, I was going to find out. The truth came to me on a Wednesday, though not in the way I expected. Jake called me mid-afternoon, his voice tense. Hey man, I've got something you need to hear. You free to meet up? An hour later, we sat in a quiet corner of a coffee shop. Jake's face was grim, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a seriousness I hadn't seen before. Chris texted me this morning, he began, sliding his phone across the table. He thought you should know. I picked up the phone and read the message thread. Chris had seen Emily and Ryan together at the gym's juice bar. Not unusual. But what followed was a detailed account of how they'd left together, walking arm in arm toward the parking lot. They didn't look like just friends, man, Chris had written. She had her hand on his chest, laughing at something he said. They got into his car and drove off. I didn't want to assume, but it didn't feel right. My heart sank as I read the words. The vague doubts and suspicions I'd been carrying solidified into a cold, hard reality. Do you know where they went? I asked Jake, my voice barely above a whisper. No, Jake said, but I had Chris check the parking lot cameras at the gym. He knows the owner. They confirmed she hasn't been parking there for weeks. She's been getting dropped off or picking him up instead. I sat back, my hands shaking. The weight of what I'd just learned pressed down on me like a boulder. What are you going to do? Jake asked after a long silence. I didn't have an answer. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to throw her betrayal in her face. Another part of me wanted proof, something undeniable that she couldn't explain away. That evening, when Emily came home, I couldn't look at her the same way. She walked through the door with her usual smile, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, and greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. How was your day? She asked, her tone light. I studied her face, searching for any hint of guilt or remorse. She looked so carefree, so normal, as if nothing had changed. Fine, I replied, my voice tight. Inside, though, I was unraveling. I knew the truth now. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The truth festered inside me for 2 days before I reached my breaking point. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time I looked at Emily, all I saw was betrayal. On Friday evening, I decided it was time. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to sit in silence anymore. Emily came home from the gym, her face glowing and hair slightly tousled. She set her bag down by the door and walked into the kitchen where I was sitting. Hey, she said, her tone casual. What's for dinner? I didn't answer right away, my hands clasped tightly on the table in front of me. She paused, sensing the tension. Is everything okay? She asked, her brows furrowing. Sit down, I said, my voice steady but cold. Her hesitation was brief, but it was there. Slowly, she lowered herself into the chair across from me. What's this about? She asked, her voice cautious. I took a deep breath, the weight of my suspicions and the evidence Jake had shared pressing against my chest. I know about you and Ryan, I said, watching her closely. Her face paled. For a split second, Her expression betrayed her. Shock, fear, and something else I couldn't place. She quickly masked it with indignation. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice rising slightly. "Don't," I said firmly, cutting her off. "Don't insult my intelligence, Emily. I've seen the messages. I know you've been spending time with him outside of the gym. I know you've been lying to me." Her eyes darted to the side, and she crossed her arms defensively. "Ryan is just my trainer. This is ridiculous. Are you seriously accusing me of cheating because I go to the gym?" "I'm accusing you because you've been sneaking around with him," I snapped. "Because you lied about where you've been and what you've been doing. Chris saw you two leave the gym together. You're not even parking there anymore. Do you think I wouldn't notice?" Her mouth opened, then closed, as if she was searching for the right words. Finally, she said, "You're overreacting. I've never done anything inappropriate. Ryan and I are friends, that's all." I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "Do you really want to go down this road, Emily? Because if you keep lying, I'll get the proof. And when I do, there won't be any coming back from this." She looked at me for a long moment, her face crumbling as the facade finally cracked. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them. I leaned back in my chair, the confirmation both a relief and a dagger to the heart. "How long?" I asked, my voice hollow. "A few months," she admitted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I never meant to hurt you." I closed my eyes, the weight of her confession sinking in. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had chosen someone else over me. "I'm leaving," I said finally, standing from the table, her head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. "Wait, we can fix this. I'll stop seeing him. I'll quit the gym. I'll do anything." "It's too late," I said, my voice cold and final. "You made your choice, Emily. Now, I'm making mine." I walked out of the kitchen, her sobs echoing behind me as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I didn't go far that night. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process what had just happened. Her tears and apologies kept replaying in my mind, but they only fueled my anger. She'd shattered my trust, our marriage, everything we'd built together. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. Emily had gone to bed, or at least pretended to. I quietly grabbed a few essentials and left again, deciding to crash at Jake's place. The next morning, my anger had cooled, replaced by a cold resolve. If Emily could betray me so thoroughly, why should I hold back? I wasn't looking for a long-term fling or something meaningful. I just wanted to feel like I mattered again, to prove to myself that someone could still want me. That evening, I downloaded a dating app. It felt strange at first, like venturing into a world I'd long forgotten. But within hours, I had matches, several. Actually, one woman, Clara, caught my eye. She was direct, confident, and didn't waste time with small talk. We met for drinks 2 nights later. Clara was stunning, with a sharp wit that kept me on my toes. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. It wasn't long before we were back at her apartment. I wasn't proud of it, but in that moment, I didn't care. For one night, I allowed myself to forget Emily and Ryan, to forget the betrayal and the pain. The next morning, as I drove home, guilt began to creep in, but it was mixed with a strange sense of vindication. Emily had broken our vows first. Why should I have to remain loyal to someone who hadn't honored me? When I walked into the house, Emily was waiting. She looked exhausted, her face pale and her eyes rimmed red. "Where were you?" she asked quietly. I set my keys on the counter and met her gaze. "Out. Out where? Does it matter?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, it felt like she knew. But she didn't press further. Instead, she said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I made my choice." "And?" I asked, crossing my arms. "I regret it," she said, her voice breaking. "I regret everything. I love you, and I want to fix this." I studied her for a long moment, her desperation etched into every line of her face. "I'm not sure if it's fixable," I said finally. and I'm not sure I want to fix it. Her tears started again, but I didn't comfort her this time. I walked past her, the distance between us growing in ways she could no longer bridge. The next few days were a blur of tension and silence. Emily tried repeatedly to talk to me, to plead her case, but I wasn't interested. The damage was done, and no amount of apologies could undo what she'd done, or what I'd done in response. I stayed civil, even as I began to pack my things. There was no screaming, no dramatic confrontations, just a cold finality in every action I took. Emily begged me to reconsider, saying she'd cut all ties with Ryan and go to therapy, but I couldn't unsee what I'd seen or unfeel what I'd felt. The betrayal was etched too deeply. The turning point came when I visited my lawyer. Sitting in that quiet office, discussing divorce proceedings, felt surreal. The legalities, the logistics, it all made the end of our marriage feel cold and transactional, but I was determined to see it through. When I returned home that evening, Emily was sitting in the living room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. She looked up as I walked in, hope flickering in her eyes. "I spoke to Ryan today," she said. My jaw tightened, but I said nothing, letting her continue. "I told him it's over, that I can't see him anymore. I blocked his number, deleted his messages. I'm serious about fixing this, about fixing us." Her words might have moved me once, but now they felt empty. I nodded, then quietly said, "It's too late, Emily." Her face crumpled. "Why? Why can't we try? We've been through so much together. Don't throw it all away." "I didn't throw it away," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You did. You made your choice when you let him into your life, and into our marriage. I can't look at you without seeing it, without feeling it." Tears streamed down her face, but I stood firm. The next day, I moved into a short-term rental. I told her I'd be in touch about the divorce papers, and that was it. No final plea, no dramatic goodbyes. Just an ending. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I went to the gym, ironically enough, not for revenge or a fresh start, but to clear my head. I cut ties with mutual friends who tried to intervene or defend her, and I leaned on Jake and my family for support. As for Clara, we didn't stay in touch. She was a momentary escape, nothing more. One night, as I sat alone in my new apartment, I reflected on everything that had happened. The pain of Emily's betrayal was still raw, but I also felt something unexpected, relief. Relief that I no longer had to live with the doubts and the lies. Relief that I was free to start over, even if it felt daunting. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I deserved better. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. And whether I did the right thing is up to you to judge. Write your opinion in the comments.